So the koan is take a step from the top of the 100-foot pole. So this, I suppose it's jumping off a pole when I choose what to talk about, since I didn't really, sometimes, I just turn my thought to talking and immediately it's there, and other times it's not. And if I'm talking live, it doesn't matter because I might find out as I open my mouth in the Zendo. But on Sunday, we like to advertise I don't know why, but in case it's encouraging or helpful, we like to put it out what we're talking about. And sometimes I forget what we're talking about and talk about something else anyway. But more or less, it's good to let you know. And so I think, what am I talking about? And then there's a great koan that says, how does the Bodhisattva of great mercy use all those hands and eyes, 1,000 hands and eyes? And there's a couple of friends. One's a teacher and the other one's a student, but they've really been around together for a long time. They're friends. And he says, it's like reaching behind you for a pillow in the night. And so earlier this week, I got a note saying, what are you talking about? And I thought, God, what am I talking about? So I reached behind me, and what came up was the 100-foot pole. So then the next task is, I wonder why I'm talking about the 100-foot pole. But one has to believe when you reach behind you in the night, you have to trust what your hand, like the treasure that your hand lights upon. And then I remembered, which I said in the announcement, I remembered, I think this was perhaps the first koan I ever spoke on in a formal talk, And I became a teacher when my teacher got sick, and as in those sort of situations, I wasn't really thinking of becoming a teacher. And so I didn't have ready-made thoughts about how to be one, which I suppose was good. But so I had no idea what to talk about. But the first, and I suppose that stepping off the 100-foot pole in some way, stepping into the mystery, So I suppose that's what I chose to talk about. Probably unconscious that it was mirroring my predicament. There's something nice. There is something touching about this koan. I woke up in the middle of the night and thought, 100-foot. I thought, then I had that sort of thing I sometimes get. Wow, this is the best koan ever. We just need to teach this one koan over and over again. And so that was sort of fun. And there's some interesting stuff goes with this. The Bodhisattva appearing as a maiden on the banks of golden sand was a special spirit. It's a kind of rather weird and lovely way to, that's the teacher. She's a Bodhisattva appearing on the banks of golden sand, a special spirit. That's other times she has 100 arms and things, and then the kind of point of it. This is just some commentary, old ancient commentary. Without going into the frightening waves, it's hard to find a fish. So you have to take so the notion of risk in life appears, doesn't it? That we have to move from where we are. And the whole longer story of the koan goes, this teacher called Changsha, teachers will sometimes do this. They had a student who became, credentialed as a teacher, then was invited somewhere and went off to run a temple somewhere. And then you'd never hear from them. Sometimes you'd hear from them, but sometimes you didn't. People would go to and fro between the temples and send messages, and so then sometimes the original teacher would send a messenger to check out on the new teacher, see, how you going? And then they would ask these things like that. And so Changsha had a student ask, how was it before you met? Changsha had also studied, this guy and Changsha studied with the same most senior teacher. How was it before you met Nanchuan, before you met the old dragon? And the teacher remained silent. Then the student said, how about after you met the great teacher? And he said, there couldn't be anything else. This is sometimes also translated as, oh, it wasn't anything special. It's nothing special. No, it's after awakening. It's nothing special. But actually, and I've translated that way, but actually I kind of like this. There couldn't be anything else. You couldn't be anyone else. The dog couldn't be anyone else. The morning, the evening, the night couldn't be anything else. Yeah. What is here is profound and fills the universe. Like that. So yeah, couldn't be anything else. There was this guy who was really a kid, but he was big and he was tall. He was like a basketball player, tall, like 7 foot tall, and came in from out in some remote northern place, and came in to study with this great teacher. And the teacher said, and the teacher was sort of, he was in bed. He wasn't that well, and he was in bed, but this new student found his way in anyway, as good students will do. And you can't go and see the master very well. And then he went in another door. And he's standing there like this huge guy. And the master sort of wakes up and sees him there and says, imposing, magnificent, where do you come from? And he said, imposing, magnificent, I come from the north. And he said, and why have you come? And the student said, not for anything else. So there's nothing other than this, not for anything else. And then Changsha, to return back to our koan, after the student said there couldn't be anything else or nothing special, exactly this, the monk returned and related this, and Changsha said, the one sitting on top of the 100-foot pole, he's entered the way, but it's not yet real, not yet completely genuine. You have that feeling, right? You have a real insight, and then you lose it again. You want to explain it to somebody, and it's a great thing, When I started having insights, a couple of times I rushed into my teacher, and he could tell something was up, and he'd say, what is it? And nothing came out. So never mind. And I just went back again. So it took a few times. So it's a rather fun thing that happens. It's entered the way, but it's not yet real. You need to take a step from the top of the 100-foot pole, and the universe in every direction will be your whole body. Just sort of rather a grand thing. The universe in every direction will be your whole body. And yeah. So and you kind of, how sometimes if you're meditating, or you don't even have to be meditating, you just fall into things, then you look at the tree and you can feel a true connection with it, or you look at a car, or you look at the rain on the pavement. You look at a flower, you look at a falling leaf, and you can tell you're connected to it. The universe will be your body. So this became a kind of famous story, because, and it's an archetype really, the thing about, climbing cliffs, falling off cliffs, climbing down cliffs. Is a great. It's a thing. I remember as a child. I don't know, I was maybe 10 or 11 or something, being out in the bush and alone and seeing there was a jump across a crevasse, and it was a deep crevasse, and I knew it wouldn't be a good idea to miss the jump, but I was good at jumping. But it was very hard to make myself make the jump, and I thought, well, if I fall down, nobody will know where I am, and I'll be in this crevasse and things like that. And anyway, in the end, I summoned up my courage, and the jump wasn't that hard. But it's a thing, like to make a jump, to step ahead. And you'll feel that, sometimes if you're blocked, right, creative people get this with writing, say, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to write, and the first really well-known writer I knew, she said, well, when you're really ready to write, the pen, she always wrote by hand, she said, the pen shakes in my hand, all the energy in me is, I'm quivering with the poem coming through, And there is that thing about, well, knowing you can't do something is not much use. So when I ask for a talk and I get a 100-foot pole, there's a lot of things my mind could be tricky with about that and say, well, didn't you talk about that last year? Or I don't know, if that was the first koan you ever talked about, you need to be more innovative than that or something. My mind it doesn't actually do those things, but it used to. And my mind, and instead of that, I just say, thank you, 100-foot pole. So now I'll have to find out what it is to talk about the 100-foot pole. So that's a thing in life. We have to find out, well, what is it? What is that sense of delight and play and stepping forward? So I want to read you a couple of things that I think are in that category. I don't know if I read this last week or I just read it to one of my friends, but I intended to read it to you and I forgot maybe, but if I did read it, bear with me. This is Charles Simic, who died, relatively recently, and I think was a very interesting poet. And I think he was Serbian, which, a hard fate with, Serbia suffers from, even more than Mexico suffers from bad neighbors. so Serbia suffers from war and, oppression and things like that. I had a philosophy professor who was Serbian when I was like 17 and first went to university, and I said, well, what's it like to be Serbian? He said, the Serbs have no word for happiness. Good to know. It was pretty funny. And he was a really interesting philosopher. He was very abstract. He only wanted to talk about people like Kant. He was very obsessed with you should never support any of the Marxist philosophers because look what happened to Serbia. But anyway, it was sort of fun. But Charles Simic is a different kettle of fish. Autumn sky. In my great-grandmother's time, all one needed was a broom to get to see places and give the geese a chase in the sky. No problem for your grandmother. Taking a step from the top of the 100-foot pole. Here's somebody I don't know, a poet I've never heard of called, well, I don't know if I've heard of, I don't think I've heard of, called Rebecca Elson. It's called Antidotes to Fear of Death. Sometimes as an antidote to fear of death, I eat the stars. So the poem goes on, but it's not going to get better than that. So I'm going to stop there. You can sort of work out how it's going to go from here, what they taste like, and things like that. But I think that was good enough. And here's Basho, the great, haiku poet of, I don't know what he was a poet of. Mayumi Oda, the marvelous painter, who used to teach with us and sat with us a lot. And she didn't like Basho. She said, I had to learn Basho. She had to learn Basho in school during the war with the bombing and things like that in Tokyo and things. So she was, I hate Basho. And I love Basho, you know. She said, he's so gloomy. And I thought, well, he's really great. Even when he's gloomy, he's really great. So when the winter chrysanthemums go, there's nothing to write about but radishes. So I think that sort of leap is like, he's not being profound or gloomy. And here's William Blake, who was a printmaker. He was an artist and a printmaker. His art is very eccentric. It's sort of like outsider art in a way, but it's very, you know, he was an engraver. And I remember, for some reason, I got fascinated with him when I was about 18 or something, and they had a big collection of his in the National Gallery in Melbourne in Australia. And so I lied, and I got in. I said I was studying Blake for my master's, you know, and I think they just needed a reason. It didn't, you know, to let you see the Blake collection, which was private, and they would, you know, pull it out of the drawers and pick up the prints and things, and it was just wonderful. And you could tell Blake was someone who just was always stepping off the pole. And here's an example of, and so he did engravings. People didn't have a way to have color reproduction, so they would pass around engravings of, say, Raphael, and who actually came out pretty well in black and white. So you know, and then they'd learn to draw from copying Raphael, and then people would color the engravings, but usually from their imagination, you know. But anyway, so he knew a lot about making books and reading, and was a notable poet as well. And this is called, it's called a memorable fancy. He had proverbs of hell. He thought that hell was he thought that everybody had gotten it wrong way around. The great poet of the century before him was really Milton, who was an incredible understanding of the English language, but he was kind of really pretty bad Puritan, and Blake just didn't like that, and going around smashing the stained glass windows and things like that. So Blake wasn't for that, and so he had these, and he'd have these visions, and here's a memorable fancy, and I just read this to a friend who said, "Well, is it a dream or vision or imagination in meditation?" And I said, Blake couldn't tell the difference. so sometimes when you're in a deep retreat, I don't know, am I awake or am I dreaming? You know, a memorable fact. I was in a printing house in hell and saw the method in which knowledge is transmitted from generation to generation. That's how we do it in Zen. In the first chamber was a dragon man clearing away the rubbish from a cave's mouth. Within, a number of dragons were hollowing the cave. So they're clearly in our lineage. We're a dragon lineage. And in the second chamber was a viper folding around the rock in the cave, and others adorning it with gold, silver, and precious stones. In the third chamber was an eagle with wings and feathers of air. He caused the inside of the cave to be infinite. Around were numbers of eagle-like men who built palaces in the immense cliffs. In the fourth chamber were lions of flaming fire raging around and melting the metals into living fluids. In the fifth chamber were unnamed forms which cast the metals into the expanse. There they were received by men who occupied the sixth chamber and took the forms of books and were arranged in libraries. So that's, when you walk into a library, that's how it got there. They used to hot type. I don't know what they do now. It's all photographic now, but unless it's letterpress, we did a letterpress poem, a healing poem that we're kind of using as a, I don't know, you can buy it, but because you can feel the type on letterpress. But normally they used to have, you know, people would pour molten metal into the type fonts, and so each type font was different, and so proofreading, you had to get it right, because you're really in trouble if you pour the molten metal in the wrong way, the wrong fonts and things. And it's kind of marvelous, and it truly is an infernal sort of process with heat and light and poisonous gases and things. So Blake knew that process, you can tell. But yeah, and after that, after all this infernal work, there were they took the form of books and were arranged in libraries. And I remember I always wondered why. I worked in a smelter for a while when I was about the same time I visited the Blake gallery, and on the west coast of Tasmania, in an old mining town cut off from the universe, and it had that, flames leaping up and molten metal being poured and splashing around, and it was a demonic place. People were fighting on the shop floor and things like that, and the foreman would look, oh, they're fighting on the shop floor. And so but it was beautiful too, because of the colors in the flames in the furnace were, peacock colors and greens and blues. And so I thought, oh, maybe I was just trying to be in Blake's world for a little bit when I went there. What else do I have here? I think the other thing I want to say, is that for me, when I stepped into meditation, it was really stepping off a 100-foot pole. And I think for all of us, because you're leaving behind the ways you assemble the world, you're leaving behind what you think you are. And then after a while, you don't much care about who you are or what you are. I suppose because Bodhidharma said, I don't know who I am, and he was saying something very profound. It wasn't a dissociative disorder. So he just didn't know, he didn't want to take that form and be fixed like that. And I think in meditation, and you notice if you have, I remember being annoyed with, the other day I ran across somebody who, I just, long ago had a difficulty with, and which was his fault. and I noticed, and then Alison noticed this and said something to me. She said, well, you must think it's your fault if you're annoyed about it. And which was true. And there's that funny way, if something comes up, it's constellating us as a person. If a grievance comes up, or I was a victim, or this happened to me, or this bad thing happened, and they shouldn't have, and she shouldn't have, and how dare they do that to someone as innocent as me and stuff. Which is, a popular entertainment of the soul, really, of the psyche. And there's some depth in it. When we do that, we discover something about ourselves too. It's not all bad, but it's also, unfortunately, for me, never true. So there's some way in which I'm not that important. If a dog has Buddha nature and I have Buddha nature, we can both both not worry about this. I can enjoy being me. So yeah, so there's something about that thing about when we step into meditation, we realize I cannot resolve anything I thought was a problem the way I normally resolve problems. And then when we notice that in order to have that problem, I have to step back into an understanding of myself that I don't really have anymore. And it's rather wonderful, really, And so I don't know. It's not like the things that were painful didn't happen, but they're a bit dreamlike now. They're drifty and Li Bai's, the clouds have vanished, have drifted off over the edge of the sky, that sort of thing. The birds have dispersed. We sit together, the mountain and me, till only the mountain remains. And so we sit together, the universe and me. I step off the pole like that. So it's kind of nice. So I guess, so stepping off the pole is something you do that is not in the category of anything else you do. So it's not going to, so that's that. But it does really help us. Tess was saying, I was talking with Tess about this, and she was saying that in the alchemical sort of colorful vision of the world, then sitting on top of the pole is the silver or the moonlit world where nothing's happening, everything's still, and everything's pure and everything comes to rest. And that's kind of true. But then at some stage you've got to move out. You need more color in the universe and more love and more connection. But it's nice to know about that moonlit world because there are no actual problems there. And that's nice. Nice work when you can get it. And one of my friends said, years and years ago, he was my book agent actually, and years, and I wondered like what he was interested in me. But anyway, and he told me the story after knowing him for a long time. He told me the story about when his awakening experience, the content of it was, oh, all the things I thought were problems aren't. They're just apparent problems. It's just life unfolding. So he wasn't holding any of those, grudges and disabilities and I'm not any good at this and stuff like that. And why did my girlfriend run off with my best friend and things like that. So none of that was, all those were apparent problems. And he said, he told me that story and I just laughed. And he said, oh, maybe we should work together. So he didn't tell me that. He just asked to work with me. And I wondered why he kept coming up to see me. That was the reason. Some of that quietness of sitting on top of the pole is not actually that precarious when you're there. It's like, you probably noticed this if you've been on a mountainside. Once you stop thinking about it, it's pretty comfortable. So this is Yuan Wu, one of the great poetic precursors of ours. Where the land meets the sky, the sun rises, the moon sets. Beyond the balustrade, the mountains are deep. The waters grow cold. So there's that sense of the perfection and precision of things. You look out, it's probably more of a twilight kind of thing, isn't it, than a dawn kind of thing, but it's there at dawn too. There's a Shinkichi poem. The wind blows hard among the pines toward the beginning of an endless past. Listen, you've heard everything. Kind of dear. Okay. Tess, you want to say anything?
Yeah, I think it is a twilight thing. You're talking a little bit about the alchemy, and I remember one of the dangers of that stage where you've somehow gone through the blackening and the getting through all your compulsions and stories and all the things you were kind of talking about, John, and you finally things have grown still and clear, and they talked about it as lovers who don't want the night to end. There's that just grasping to that perfection and clarity and beauty and all that, but then the dawn has to come. And I had such a fun memory as we were sitting. When I was a kid, there was a water park that had two of the toppest highest water slides, I think, I don't know, anywhere in the West or something. One was called the Acapulco Cliff Dive, and I can't remember what the other one was called. But the first one, all you had to do was be brave enough to just go down, and it was just straight down, and you'd actually come off of the water slide. It was so steep, and you'd be white knuckling it, but if you'd made it down, you were all right. But the second one, which didn't look as steep, but you had to go down, and then you had to actually be able to come back up again and get over the next hump. And if you were only 10 or 11 years old, you didn't have enough body weight usually to try to get to you, and you'd slide down, and it would be very shameful. And if you missed twice, they wouldn't let you back on the thing. And so you'd have to muster all this sort of heft to get your body and your, as much as you could. And I was thinking about how, like, there's that moment of stepping, but then there's the staying with having gone, the staying with things as you're moving to actually be able to get over the second hump. And I was talking to a friend today who's very much at a stage in her life where she can see all these things about who she's been in relationship and how painful that's been and how it has to do with her parent, all the things, she can see them. And she just kept saying to me, well, but how will I be able to open my heart, or how will I be able to trust, or how will I be able to? And I just kept thinking, you have to be able to just step and stay with things, even in the moments you think you can't possibly bear, to actually let the world meet you. And it's kind of touching because it does just completely overwhelm you to be taken by the world like that, but to not lose consciousness in that, to actually be able to stay open and let the world surprise you, I think just kept coming to mind. So that's it for me.
Thank you. It's a little kid trying to get heavier so she can get over. It's so great. Okay. Angela Raquel is on here. Angela Rockel, rather, is on here somewhere. Do you have anything to say?
Well, I was just thinking about, I teach some little yoga classes, and remembering starting as a student, in my 20s, I'm not a natural at all, and started out of desperation because I had lots of injuries. And remember the teacher saying to me, you start with your feet. Can you feel where they touch the ground? And really at that time it was no, actually. I've got this vague sense that I'm in contact somehow, but I couldn't feel any of the texture of it. And so just proceeding from there, and over the years experiencing in myself and in students, just that process from, well, here are some movements that some bodies can do and some bodies like to do. You put your foot here, you turn your leg here, the pelvis goes this way, the spine goes that way. Just observing and experiencing the movement from this is what you do, the instruction from outside, to the experience inside, how it is for me, how it is for students. I see that happening, and that's the step off the 100-foot pole that I see and experience happening every day, is the movement from this is how you're supposed to do it to this is how it actually feels and is experienced, and utterly different for each one. So sorry, that was a bit of a rave, but that's how it is for me. Thanks.
John Joseph, you have anything to say? Stepping off poles?
Actually, what I wanted to say is how much I love not stepping off the pole, sitting on the pole just in the moonlight, just enjoying that sort of that vastness, you know, where it's just the whole universe is open before you. But we do have to step, as you said, you mentioned, and I was just thinking a moment ago about I log on to Facebook once every couple of weeks or so, and I think it's become my teacher because I scroll through the kitten pictures and the little baby pictures and stuff, and I get to this function. It's called Reels. I think it's called Reels, but it's like these little short TikTok videos. And the Facebook bot has somehow gotten my number, and it feeds me the pictures that it thinks I want to see. And I always get this long string of these guys jumping off these cliffs in the Alps in these bat suits, you know. It's just this impossible jump, and they go down and down and down and down, and then they open up their wings, or they do a backflip off a incredibly high bridge and then go down and down and down. Just before they hit, they open up their parachute or something. So thank you, Facebook bot.
Very good. George, do you want to say anything?
I'm afraid I took what you said kind of literally, or I took the koan kind of literally, and thought back to when I was in university. I decided I had to jump out of a plane to, I don't know, prove that I was gutsy enough to do it, which is an impulse I don't really trust. But anyway, I ended up, this was in England, and I ended up at a Battle of Britain airfield, and the instructor was a parachute regiment sergeant, a former, and he didn't hold with the new way of sitting in someone's lap while you jumped out of the plane. You just went up and you hooked your static line to a wire, and then you stepped out onto a step in the Cessna and hung onto the strap. To the strut. And what was interesting to me was that it wasn't when I actually jumped that I was scared. It was when I was holding on to the plane. I still had the option of climbing back in and saying, I'm not going to do this. But once I got the tap on the shoulder and I pushed off and jumped into the void, it was actually a wonderful feeling. I mean, I was probably just shock, but I just felt like everything was possible. Everything was possible at that point, and including missing entirely where I was aiming for and ending up in a cornfield. But that was it. But I'll always remember that feeling of just utter possibility and the end of fear, oddly enough. That's it.
Thank you. There are worse things than cornfields, you know. And also, I think, it's interesting. All these metaphors for jump, you know, all these literal ways we jump, and metaphors for starting something anew. Thank you. Take a step from the top of the 100-foot pole. And the universe in every direction will be your whole body.